Poor Elijah. He's been standing up to powerful people, speaking unwelcome truths, silencing the prophets of false gods, and now Jezebel, the ruler of the land, has sent him fleeing into the wilderness under threat of death. That's where our passage in 1 Kings finds him. The wilderness, that place of disorientation and loss through which his ancestors wandered for 40 years, trying to find their way to the promised land. Yeah, that wilderness. There he is, out there all alone, with nothing to show for all his courageous words and no idea even where he's headed. He staggers up to the one growing thing in the entire landscape and collapses under its patch of shade. And what does he say to God? It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. In other words, I am no better than dead people, no better than dust. Return me to dust, O Lord. I'm tired. I'm done. It is enough. Well, I bet there's more than one of us here who can relate to that state of mind. I know many of my fellow church leaders do. Here in month 18 of a pandemic whose endpoint seems to keep receding over the horizon, we too are wandering in a wilderness. We too have contended with months of isolation and uncertainty as lies whip across the internet like wildfires, fueling attacks on our very democracy, burning away the consensus we need to reach herd immunity, and thereby turning our population into a breeding ground for new and more dangerous variants. All the while, climate chaos, racial oppression, economic inequality, and culture wars continue to engulf us. This wilderness is no rose garden, that's for certain. It's almost impossible to make even basic plans. How, like Elijah, so many of us must feel. I'm tired, Lord. I'm done. It is enough. What happens to Elijah in that state of despair? He falls asleep, an act with obvious metaphoric overtones, only to be awakened twice by an angel offering bread and water. Get up and eat, the angel instructs him, adding the second time, otherwise the journey will be too much for you. And I can't help but imagine Elijah thinking, the journey's already too much for me. Have you been listening to a thing I've said? And anyway, what journey? Where the heck do I go from here? The answer to that question, of course, is that Elijah is headed to Mount Horeb, aka Mount Sinai, to have the experience of a lifetime, an encounter with God in the sound of sheer silence. But of course, he doesn't know that at this time. That's the thing about stories, biblical or otherwise. We tell them looking backward, but we have to live them looking forward into the fog of the future. And this side of paradise, we have no clue what kind of stories ours will turn out to be. Is it going to be a romance, an epic, a tragedy? Will it last 40 more days or 40 more years? Will it end on the mountaintop or in the valley of the shadow? Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you, the angel tells Elijah. Take nourishment where you find it. Receive sustenance, that which sustains. Where do you find sustenance? What keeps you going when you're tired? What fills you with bread for the journey? It seems to me these questions have gained new significance in this COVID-19 time. The world that is emerging from the past 18 months is not the world that entered into them. There will be no return to normal. Like the Israelites or Elijah or anyone else in the wilderness, we're not the same as we were, and we have also not arrived where we're going. And so we need bread. We need to keep hydrated and fueled, to draw comfort and strength, to provide and accept support. We need to eat so the journey will not be too much for us. And we need to feed each other. Maybe that is the question for us as the church in this time. How do we offer bread for the journey? How do we provide what people need to keep going? The nourishment of prayer, the consolation of community, the space to come to Jesus, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, so you can find rest for your souls. There's this letter published in the New York Times that keeps haunting me ever since I read it 5 years ago. It was by a man named Peter DeMarco, whose 34-year-old wife, Laura, had experienced a sudden and severe asthma attack. After the attack, she was in a coma in a hospital ICU for a week, and then she died. The letter accompanies a photo of the couple hiking in Scotland a year prior. They each have a hand on the other's back, silhouetted against the misty green of the moor, her dark hair wisping away from her braid, a shy smile creeping up the side of her face. They look as far from death as anyone could be. They look happy. After such a loss, a spouse might be tempted to turn his devastation outward and blame the medical system in some way for its failures. But DeMarco's letter is a thank you to the nurses, technicians, and doctors at the hospital for treating his wife with professionalism and kindness and dignity as she lay unconscious. He describes all the little gestures that the staff made, patiently answering the family's questions, fetching water for Laura's parents, knowing when to quietly do their job while DeMarco cried, and when to give him a hug. It's a tribute, really, to all the ways they gave him bread for the journey. On the last day of Laura's life, DeMarco recounts how people kept dropping by to say their goodbyes. And when they were finally gone, around 4 p.m., he was exhausted. He was done. He was tired and just wanted to spend one last precious hour with his wife. He writes, "So I asked her nurses, Donna and Jen, if they could help me set up the recliner, which was so uncomfortable, but all I had, next to Laura again. They had a better idea. They shifted Laura to the right side of her bed, leaving just enough room for me to crawl in with her one last time. I asked if they could give us 1 hour without a single interruption, and they nodded, closing the curtains and the doors and shutting off the lights. I nestled my body against hers. She looked so beautiful, and I told her so, stroking her hair and face. I laid my head on her chest, feeling it rise and fall with each breath, her heartbeat in my ear. It was our last tender moment as husband and wife, and it was more natural and pure and comforting than anything I've ever felt. and then I fell asleep. I will remember that last hour together for the rest of my life. It was a gift beyond gifts, and I have Donna and Jen to thank for it. Really, I have all of you to thank for it. How do we offer bread for the journey? It's not about passing people blithe reassurances. It's not about handing out easy grace or cheerfully skipping past how hard the way can be. It's about ensuring that no one has to walk it alone. It's about just being there, doing what needs to be done, holding open a space for what needs to be said or prayed. It's about companioning, from a word that actually means to share bread. Companioning so that the journey will not be too much for us. Amen.